the bizarro thing that's happening is that, Elon Musk, who is taking control of government like a toddler takes control of a rattle, shaking it wildly without a real plan. He asked, you'll recall, I shouldn't say asked, demanded from all federal workers a message, an email, listing the 5 things they had done that week.
Right. They said you'd be fired if you didn't turn the email in, right?
Exactly. It was under threat of termination.
Mm.
So many people, as you know, there was a controversy at the time. We reported on it. We're told you don't have to respond to this, but a lot of people did respond to that because they're worried about losing their job. Well, when they sent that email back as demanded, there wasn't the infrastructure to even read the email, and it got bounced back. A number of employees across multiple agencies have received bounce-back emails indicating that the mailbox they were directed to at the Office of Personnel Management is full, thus preventing them from sending their reports. After submitting their weekly 5 things email on Monday, some federal employees received an automated response saying the recipient's mailbox is full and can't accept messages now.
So they didn't have the infrastructure that they needed to accept all the massive amounts of emails that they required? Great.
He's a tech genius, but he's a big picture guy, Kim. He doesn't really think things through.
Got it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's busy launching rockets and stuff. You can't bother him with actually focusing on the business of managing government. Yeah. When it comes to administration and infrastructure, even if it's technical, apparently this technical genius couldn't get that done. And his Doge people are too busy firing everyone to worry about whether or not there are infrastructure setups in place to handle the email responses. So after that bizarre story, we get to what's happening on Capitol Hill. As you might be aware, once again, PBS and NPR are in the crosshairs of the GOP. This is not the first time this has happened, but it might be the last time it happens because they might actually succeed in getting rid of NPR and PBS. The biggest public media networks are being accused of bias and being accused of being communist. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, never one to shy away from a controversy like this, where she can hurl and smear. The Georgia Republican who actually organized this hearing, she called it an anti-American airwaves hearing, opened her remarks by deriding PBS and NPR. Deriding is a ding word, by the way. And called both radical left-wing echo chambers that published skewered news reports and indoctrinated children with LGBTQ programming. The leaders of both PBS and NPR testifying that those claims are untrue, arguing that their stations served as a crucial source of accurate information. Sorry, I have a cough.
They think that it's a communist agenda, but NPR and PBS have very high journalistic standards. Very high.
Yeah, I'd suggest that their journalistic standards exceed those oftentimes of what is traditional right-wing media, like a Fox News channel, for example. But the back and forth was along these lines. Stephen Lynch, who's a Democrat from Massachusetts, said Republican lawmakers would rather go after Big Bird than President Trump.
Karen says, I think MTG is the one who's skewed.
Yeah, well, she's definitely a piece of work. If shame was still a thing, he said, this hearing would be shameful. Again, it was organized by a new congressional subcommittee, and Doge represented another front in this extraordinary 2 months of unrelenting attacks, as is noted here. The White House has barred the AP, as you know, from the attendance of many events, any at the White House. You have to cough again, excuse me.
Yeah. Rich says Sesame Street is a commune. Yes, this highlights the communist nature of it, right?
Absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. And so Those are two things that you might view on some level as absurd. There is an absurdity to it, but there's also a real there's a real danger to it. I mean, this is what's happening, and I'd also say that the press is being cowed. They're going after media hard. It's easy to go after public media first because, of course, public media depends largely on federal dollars and public dollars. But you've seen what they've done with ABC, CBS, and they're going after other media organizations as well. I think this is represents a real front on the aggressive moves to dominate the propaganda and information that comes to Americans across the board and across the political spectrum. So this is why I think independent media is so important. But we're seeing repeatedly journalists being put in very tough positions, and journalistic institutions. I mean, the LA Times, the New York Times, the Washington Post, et cetera. Those are three high-profile examples being forced to confront how they're going to handle the aggression of this administration. It's scary. It's scary. And so, just to review, you've got a government that is being cored out, right? The idea is to dismantle this government, and then the academic institutions, you're going after them, and then you'll go after the media institutions. Now, the judicial institutions are still out there, but they will be, well, already they're being, those judges who are ruling against this administration are being vilified. But I'd suggest that that represents yet another front in this complete takeover. It's an authoritarian playbook. And so even as we laugh about Elmo and PBS and the idea that you would take off Sesame Street because it's a communist or it's some kind of LGBTQ indoctrination, and it's laughable, but it's also part of a plan that's got nobody laughing. So as we continue, I think you'll see more of this, and it's scary. And by the way, we don't just talk about stuff that's wrong and that this administration is doing. We do talk about solutions and ways in which you can organize and ways in which you can make your voice heard. I've talked about it before. You should call. You should write. Traditionally, lawmakers do pay attention to that. Make noise. Even if you're a Democrat and it's a Republican lawmaker, it doesn't matter. Making noise does have an effect. So, but that's the latest on Big Bird, Elmo, PBS. I mean, they do such good work on PBS. I mean, the stuff is just so elegantly done and wonderfully important, to a child's development, to adult development. The documentaries that are done, the American Experience series, in which you have real history being communicated in wonderful ways. The series on the national parks. I mean, I don't need to tell you, Ken Burns' Civil War stuff. This is all, wonderful stuff. But it's all viewed as disposable because they want to take over the entire landscape. It's scary. It's a bit scary.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Meantime, RFK Jr., everybody's favorite Democrat. Remember, he was a Democrat at one time. He's from that famous family. I don't know if you're familiar with them, the RFK family. His dad was RFK. That's why they call him RFK Jr. But he is going after the health department workers. And when I say going after them, he laid off 10,000 of them. It's a major restructuring of the department. 82,000 people work for HHS, a Health and Human Services Department, and he is trying to reorganize, he says. The layoffs, a drastic reduction in personnel for this health department that doesn't just exist in Washington. You understand that these offices are across the country. When you eat meat, you are eating meat that was approved of and met certain standards set by RFK Jr.'s organization. There's somebody there, a meat inspector, who is making sure that the meat is handled in a certain way and that these creatures are slaughtered in certain ways and that the meat isn't lying around. I use meat as an example. It's also in vegetable fields and across the board. These regulatory aspects of his agency are critical to human health. to America's health. Anyway, they are restructuring the entire place. They're going to create a new division called the Administration for a Healthy America. And you know, when they're renaming something like that, the Administration for a Healthy America, it can only be unhealthy.
Oh,
It's
man.
you can just use the rule of opposites in all of these cases. We're going to do more with less, Mr. Kennedy said, as he acknowledged it would be a painful period for HHS. The 28 divisions of the health agency will be consolidated into 15 new divisions. And the staff cuts are being made in line with President Trump's order to implement the Department of Government Efficiency shrinking of the federal workforce. Yeah. Then there's some slams at the Biden administration, et cetera. But that's the situation with HHS under Kennedy. And so 10,000 federal workers are laid off without regard, I'm guessing, because this is the manner in which things have been done up to this point for how talented they are, critical they are, and what seniority they have. So, meantime, this all is existing in an environment that is against the Trump backdrop regarding Greenland, Canada, Mexico, and Trump is now saying that the U.S. will go as far as we have to go to acquire Greenland. Now, what does that mean, as far as we have to go? Literally said this and said a U.S. delegation was traveling to the territory this week to, quote, let them know that we need Greenland for international safety and security. We need it, and we have to have it.
Right ahead of a visit by Vice President Vance and his wife, Usha. It's kind of threatening.
And you pointed out yesterday, Kim, that Usha and J.D. Vance are not going to be making sort of the widely talked about kind of tour of Greenland that had originally been talked about. Instead, they're going to be staying at Army bases or military bases, I think.
Military installation, yeah.
Yeah, right. So,
because they don't want to run into angry Greenlanders. Can you imagine if Vice President Vance were to walk through whatever town? I almost said Reykjavik, wrong cold island.
That's next, Kim. That's next.
Don't
get
next
ahead
on
of
the
us.
list.
Yeah.
But imagine if they were there walking through and the Greenlanders, I mean, they would be pelted with whatever kind of fish.
Whatever fish they have there, they'd be pelted by them.
Right.
So he says, we need it. We have to have it. It's an island that from a defensive posture, this is against my Lord and Savior, Donald Trump speaking. It's an island that from a defensive posture and even offensive posture, that's all the postures. There's a defensive and an offensive. He's covered them both. It's something we need, he said, quote, especially with the world the way it is. I hate to put it that way, but we're going to have it, he said. Asked if he thinks the Greenlandic public will be on board with his plans, Trump said he wasn't sure. He says, I don't know. I don't think they're uneager, but I think that we have to do it and we have to convince them. Ah, nice. Convince them that we're the same way we've convinced all the people that we're deporting right now. It's just time for you to leave this country. And we're convincing you by sending some thugs around to wrap you up, put you on a plane, and send you to a horror show in another country. Yeah. That's the latest on Greenland and Donald Trump. Hey, speaking of the horror shows in another country, we came across something, and I will get the signal stuff. I will get to all of that, I promise. There have been some developments, so I'll get to that. But speaking of horror shows, speaking of horror shows, I wanted the...
It's not a good one.
Thank you. That's what I want. That's what I wanted. Thank you. Speaking of horror shows, I did see this, and Kim brought it up to us in a kind of pre-show meeting again today. This Christine Nome video of her... She shoots this video in front of this horrible prison. You know, what is it? This is in this is in El Salvador, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Albert, do you have it? Let's run. We'll run a little bit of it. Just the inhumanity of it is, turning this into a photo op is really a pretty.
I saw a post. Someone said it reminded them of a concentration camp with these men packed in on top of each other and their heads all shaved. And here she is with her, made sure that her hair was curled and all of her makeup was in place and her super tight shirt, highlights her boobs so that we get her perfect standing in front of this humanitarian grotesqueness.
Mhm.
I
Well,
would
first of
say
all, that is the way she
un-American.
looks all the time. There is no makeup and no hair, people.
Oh,
Okay, so how
got it.
dare you? Secondly,
The glam squad. She
I
took them with her to El
that's she
Salvador.
just grabbed that shirt. It was a little something she threw on. I mean, you're
Right.
really tough on her.
Mhm.
Let's watch this, Albert. It is absolutely astounding.
And visiting this facility. And first of all, I want to thank El Salvador and their president for their partnership with the United States of America to bring our terrorists here and to incarcerate them and have consequences for the violence that they have perpetuated in our communities. I also want everybody to know, if you come to our country illegally, this is one of the consequences you could face. First of all, do not come to our country illegally. You will be removed and you will be prosecuted. But know that this facility is one of the tools in our toolkit that we will use if you commit crimes against the American people.
Okay, so
let me say that there are people there. We know of 3 of them, right, who likely didn't commit any crimes against the American people. They were swept up with these other Venezuelans who may or may not have been in gangs and sent to El Salvador. One of them is a gay makeup artist. Another is a soccer player. The third, I forget the profile on the third, but there is a third. And those are the 3 we know about. I mean, this sweep and incarceration, it's done in the same way that DOJ is pursuing the U.S. government cutbacks. It's done recklessly. It's done without regard for who is involved or what they do. All they know is that these people are from a country other than the U.S. originally, and they're getting swept up and deported before there can even be the basic, and I've mentioned this before, immigration courts are super basic. They're not like a lot of other courts. The process, if you want to think of it that way, the judicial process goes fairly rapidly. So it's not as though it's a big challenge to put these people through that due process. But they don't do it. They just swept them up and move them out. And they're doing the same thing with that PhD student from Yale, I think it was, or Columbia. I mean, it's and the other student from Columbia. I mean, these, at the academic institutions, they're really scared. I don't blame them. There is one student, I believe, also a PhD student from Columbia, who's in hiding now, worried that because they were involved in protests against what was going on in Gaza, that they could be deported as well. There is no, and perhaps this is the most chilling part, there is no due process associated with it. There's no way in which these people can make their case. They can't contact a lawyer. You saw that place, that prison.
There's two new students this week. There's a doctoral student from Iran at the University of Alabama who's been detained. There's a doctoral student at Tufts who's
Thank you.
from
That was it.
Turkey who's
Right.
been detained. So, and these are in addition to the students from Columbia and other schools. So now there are students who have been protesting, which is a right in America, no matter where you're from, because we have freedom of speech here, who, because they have a different opinion than the Trump administration, are being scooped up and sent away.
And the reason this is truly galling is because one of the great things about this country has been, and it's been a struggle. It's not always in place, but it's being taken down like a wrecking ball now, is the notion that you have due process. They can't just scoop you up on the street and imprison you. You will get to see a judge. You will get to have a lawyer. And if you cannot afford a lawyer, one will be appointed. It is a real thing in America. And it exists for all of these people, even those that were scooped up, even those that are not native to this country or born in this country. So the next step is obviously that there is a fear that begins to infect the population, and I think that fear is as I said, hit universities, it's hit media, it's hit the legal profession. These are dark times from that standpoint.
When do people start caring? As Steven says here, first they came for the students. Do we not care because the students are brown people from countries that, we don't really, that don't rank on our radar? Because first they start telling students from other countries that we don't have freedom of speech here, and then they start telling the rest of us that. So when is it important as Americans to stand up and say, no, these are rights that we consider incredibly important to the fabric of our country, and it doesn't matter who you are or where you're from? When do we start standing up for that?
It's deeply troubling that we wonder, as you have just wondered out loud, like what the tipping point is. At what point, does everybody go, oh, wait a minute, whoa, we didn't sign up for this. And by then, usually it's too late. So these are really things that should concern all Americans. You're witnessing the rise of the Fourth Reich and its goons, Gestapo, kidnapping people off the street, says TM. I mean, I can't argue with that. I don't understand how you can just scoop up people off the street, as has been done, and deport them or erase them from the society. We don't know what happened to a couple of these people that they have gotten rid of. It isn't all set in stone yet, says Mary D. This is when we need to hit the streets and say no to this BS. And there are coalitions of Americans putting together some protests, et cetera. But what makes you think we don't care? What do we do? Yeah, Carol Ford says, yeah, I think Kim's asking the question rhetorically. Obviously, I think many people care. People won't care until something starts to hit them in the pocketbook, says Randy. Otherwise, it's just something happening to other people. I hate to say it, but that probably is the comment of the day so far when it comes to this issue. This is them testing the waters with these students. They will keep going, says Rob J. Yeah. And this is what I was saying about the plan, and then I'll bring Rothman on Social Security. I mean, they've got the tiger by the tail with Social Security. They have gone after Social Security so recklessly, so stupidly, I mean, without regard for what the diminishment of Social Security is going to do to many of the constituents that they represent, that these Republican lawmakers, they're going to have some explaining to do. And as you know, they can't even show up to their town halls or their meetings with constituents anymore. They can't do it. It's a silence that coexists with this power grab, and it is wildly concerning. So, but that's a little bit of what's happening right now.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.